Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. There's been a big push to make everybody afraid of Sharia law, and if you're an American, it's a very good argument that we wouldn't have a constitution if Sharia law didn't come, if God did not give this to us 1,400 years ago. Sharia law is the rules that God has outlined in the Quran and that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, has given us, and which are handed down in writings we call hadith. And this is where they are derived from. Now, I'm going to go through some of the parts of the Constitution that match up with Sharia law. And number one is freedom of religion. The U.S. Constitution protects free exercise of religion and prohibits state establishment of religion. Sharia principle, no compulsion in religion. This comes right out of the Quran, chapter 2, verse 256. There is no compulsion in religion. Faith must be voluntary. Forced conversion is prohibited in Sharia law. Both systems reject coerced belief and recognize freedom of conscience. The difference here, though, is that Sharia does not allow Satanism, right? These satanic pedophiles, that's one of the reasons that I guess they might be afraid, because Sharia does not allow Satanism, right? You don't have to believe in Islam. You can be a Christian, you can be an atheist, you can be a Hindu. But being a Satanist is not something that would be allowed, at least publicly. Let's scroll on down here. Equality before the law. Equal protection clause of the 14th Amendment. And in Sharia, all people are equal before the law, regardless of race, lineage, or wealth. Prophet Muhammad stated that even his own family would be subject to the same law. It aligns that justice applies equally to rulers and citizens. The Khalifa, the ruler of the Muslims, two people after Prophet Muhammad, Omar is his name. He was sued and he went to court, and they called him the Amir, the Amir Mu'mineen, the ruler of the believers, as he entered into the court, and he said, that's wrong. That's prejudicing the judge against the lady that was suing him. And so equality before the law is a very big principle in Islam. Presumption of innocence. The U.S. Constitution talks about due process under the 5th and the 14th Amendments. The Sharia principle, the burden of proof is on the claimant, and the oath is upon the one who denies. Doubt invalidates punishment. So if there's some doubt, it's not a reasonable doubt, but if there's any kind of doubt, we can't punish, because sometimes the punishments are very strict, and that's also part of keeping people from committing these crimes. The alignment is a person is innocent until proven guilty. Due process and fair trial. The U.S. Constitution's 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendments guarantees due process, fair trial, and legal protections. The Sharia principle that matches this is a right to a hearing, evidence, witnesses, and defense. Secret trials and arbitrary punishment are forbidden. Justice, what aligns is justice requires transparency and procedural fairness. 5. Protection of life. The Constitution, the right to life implicit throughout the Constitution. This is the rights the Constitution guarantees are how to protect life. And the Sharia principle is protection of life is one of the 5 higher objectives of Sharia. Killing an innocent person is strictly forbidden. Human life, the alignment is human life is sacred and protected. Number 6, protection of property. The 5th Amendment prohibits deprivation of property without due process. The Sharia principle that matches this is private property is inviolable. Theft, fraud, and unlawful seizure are prohibited. Alignment is property rights are fundamental in both the United States Constitution and Sharia law. Number 7, protection against unreasonable searches. This is what the 4th Amendment is all about. In Sharia, the prohibition of spying, unwarranted intrusion, invasion of privacy. Homes cannot be entered without permission. You're supposed to give people all the privacy in their home. Don't be spying on people in their houses. They have the presumption of privacy in their house. And we, as Muslims, are not allowed to go and see if they're doing something wrong in there, right? That's not our business. The alignment is privacy is legally protected. Number 7, protection against unreasonable searches. Oh, we just did that. Number 8, freedom of speech with responsibility, right? You can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater is what they like to say. The U.S. Constitution, First Amendment protects free speech. Sharia principle is speech is protected, especially speaking truth against injustice. But defamation, perjury, and incitement are prohibited, which they're also prohibited, or they used to be prohibited in the United States. I think that's kind of not the case anymore. Speech is valued, but not absolute in either system. This is where they align. 9, the right to legal representation. The U.S. Constitution guarantees the right to counsel, the right to a lawyer if you've been charged with a crime. The Sharia principle is an accused person may appoint a representative or advocate to talk for them. The alignment is they both have the right to defense, and it is essential to justice. Sharia law is all about justice. That's a lot of people like to say that Islam is a religion of peace, and there is truth to that. But more so than peace is justice. Islam is a religion of justice. And through justice, peace is achieved. Through submission to God, peace is achieved in our hearts. 10, prohibition of collective punishment. The U.S. Constitution says individual responsibility under criminal law. Sharia principle, no soul bears the burden of another. Punishment for what someone else has done is strictly forbidden. The alignment is guilt is personal, not inherent or collective. 11, prohibition of cruel and arbitrary punishment. The 8th Amendment prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. The Sharia principle that matches this is punishments must meet strict evidentiary standards, proportionality, and mercy. Doubt prevents punishment. The alignment is justice must not be arbitrary or excessive. Now, here, Sharia exceeds the U.S. Constitution. The way that it's usually mentioned is that there must be a reasonable, beyond reasonable doubt, right? But that means you can still have some doubt, and but not in Sharia. Right? In Sharia, it must be absolute if you're going to have punishment. 12, the right to dignity. The U.S. Constitution, implicit throughout civil rights protections. That's what it is. The Constitution is a document of civil right protections, an agreement amongst people. The Sharia principle is human dignity is inherent to all people. Humiliation, torture, and abuse are forbidden. The alignment is human dignity is foundational in both. Let's see, I think we got one more. Charitable welfare and social responsibility. The U.S. Constitution, Congress may tax and spend for the general welfare. Right? Social Security. The Sharia principle, mandatory charity, which we call zakat, and voluntary charity, which we call sadaqah, support the poor, the disabled, the vulnerable. Also, there are 7 categories, which we're not going to go into right now because this is not a lesson on Islam. This is showing people that Sharia is not this big scary thing. Zakat and sadaqah, especially zakat, are to go to those in need. The alignment is society has an obligation to care for those in need. We got a couple more here. Contracts and commercial law, number 14. The U.S. Constitution, contracts clause and commercial law protections. Sharia principle, contracts must be honored. Fraud, deception, and exploitation are prohibited. The alignment is the rule of law in commerce and business. which seems like is kind of missing in the United States these days. Limits on government power. I mean, that's kind of what the Constitution is supposed to be about, right? Separation of powers, checks and balances, we're told, although we kind of throw that away when we want to. The Sharia principle is rulers are subject to the law and accountable. Like I had mentioned earlier, the ruler of the Muslims, Omar, was taken to court. Tyranny and absolute power are forbidden in Sharia law. It doesn't exist, not in real Sharia law. The alignment is government authority is limited and accountable. 16, the right to protest and petition authority. The U.S. Constitution, First Amendment right to petition the government. Sharia principle, commanding good and forbidding injustice, including holding leaders accountable. Might not be like street kind of protest, might be a lawsuit kind of a thing in Sharia, but everybody is able to have a redress for their problems that they think are unjust towards them. The alignment is citizens may challenge injustice. Now here's some important clarifications is that Sharia law is not a single penal code, right? Most of it concerns ethics, contracts, family law, charity, and justice. U.S. Muslims already practice Sharia law daily in ways fully compliant with U.S. law. It is not like, you have to ignore the United States law to follow Sharia law. You're actually following them both. Such as prayer, charity, contracts, marriage agreements, and arbitration. These are things that Muslims still do following the Sharia law examples. The Constitution remains the supreme law of the land in the United States, and Sharia alignment is ethical and legal overlap, not replacement. So they agree in many areas. There are some areas they don't agree in, but in the ones that seem to really count, they both really agree. And now, why is this, right? Let's talk about this for just a second. Let me start with let's start with university or graduation, even in high school. In the original university, the first university, it's still operating in Morocco, or the longest operating institute of learning is in Morocco. It's a university. It's grown up into a university, and they didn't have this in England or in Europe at the time. It's like, I think, 1,100 years old, something like that. And so the Western people, the Europeans, would come down to study. And they were so enamored that they brought some customs home when they created their own universities. One of them is the square cap. The square cap represents the Quran. That's what that is. The Quran is over their heads, right? The Quran, in Muslims, the Quran is the words of God. And so the Quran is above everything else. And that's why the square hat is the Quran is above everybody's head. It's above everything else. And then you see the long black dress, which, if you really think about it, this looks like the abayas that the ladies wear. But back in the day, and in some of the Arab countries very much today, like I'm wearing a thobe today, these are very representative of non-revealing clothing, right? Of modesty. And so those two examples actually come from Islam. And you all wear it. And, you did. If you graduated high school, you graduated university or college or anywhere, you wore the square hat and you wore the gown. These were from Islam. And so these principles came from these universities, these institutes of learning that were teaching Sharia law. And then this Sharia law was brought back to Europe and influenced the Magna Carta and influenced the United States Constitution. And maybe we wouldn't have these great Western laws, these great legal documents, if it wasn't for Sharia law. Now, you really got to ask yourself, who's got a vested interest in making you afraid of this? Who's got a vested interest in changing the public narrative? Who's got a vested interest in hiding their obvious televised crimes? Who is it? You know.